Well, hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining me today on this next episode of Reading Michael Jackson. We are going to be continuing with our read and discussion of Michael's books of poetry and reflections, Dancing the Dream. Before we get into it today, though, I wanted to just briefly reflect on something. This morning, I was listening to the song Money from Michael's History album. And I love this song. I know it's a song many fans love. And I was sort of listening to it while reflecting on some of the comments I've made in a previous episode where I was talking about how I don't really appreciate or really agree with people saying that Michael was a child inside. Now, I don't know what people mean entirely when they say that, but I think there is a narrative around Michael that he had a sort of childlike naivete about the world. I don't know, I've seen a lot of people describe him as like a child inside a grown man's body. And I don't like the implications of that. The infantilizing of Michael is not something I personally ascribe to, because I think a person can be very innocent or approach life in a very innocent way while also being very aware of what the world is. And I think Money is a great example of that, where I think that the song Money is about really dark aspects of human nature, no pun intended, really dark aspects of how money corrupts, but also the human impulse toward greed. And I think that if you look at Michael's catalog, there are a lot of darker songs throughout it. There's an awareness of the world. I think I said previously as well, I don't really see him as sheltered, or I don't really like thinking of him in those terms because I don't know that that's productive or truly honest. Anyway, I was thinking about that and thinking about his discography. We have, of course, Money and many other songs on the History album. They Don't Care About Us, This Time Around, Tabloid Junkie. We also have Morphine, which is one of my personal favorite songs. We have Do You Know Where Your Children Are? So we have a lot of songs in his discography that show an awareness of the darkness of life and the world. And I think that he's just very misunderstood in that he just chose to live in such a way that he fed the light, beautiful parts of himself more than the dark parts, if that makes sense. I mean, of course, I didn't know him, unfortunately. So this is just like all of us who didn't know him, but think about him and are curious about him. That's my take. Anyway, I was thinking about that with Money, and I was thinking about how Wesley Snipes talked about once in an interview how he ran into Michael, I think in South Africa. And they had like long, deep intellectual conversations about Malcolm X and like all of these really serious, significant figures and moments in history and things. And like, these are not conversations or songs of children, and I just think that that's an important thing to recognize, especially as we're reading some of his work that is outside the context of music. We get a different layer of insight into him, and I think it's important to kind of take inventory of how we look at him. So anyway, I didn't intend to talk so long at the start here, so I apologize. We are continuing today with the fourth piece in this book, Dancing the Dream. This piece is the first one that is written more as a reflection or a short essay style. So let's get into it. This is Wings Without Me. Wings Without Me. It was August, and I was looking up at the sky. With one hand shielding my eyes, I made out a falcon soaring on the currents of hot, swirling air. Higher and higher it spiraled until with one unearthly shriek, it disappeared. All at once, I felt left behind. Why did you grow wings without me? I mourned. Then my spirit said, the falcon's way is not the only way. Your thoughts are as free as any bird. So I shut my eyes and my spirit took off, spiraling as high as the falcon and then beyond, so that I was looking down over the whole earth. But something was wrong. Why did I feel so cold and alone? You grew wings without me, my heart said. What good is freedom without love? So I went quietly to the bed of a sick child and sang him a lullaby. He fell asleep smiling, and my heart took off. Joining my spirit as it circled over the earth, I was free and loving, but still something was wrong. You grew wings without me, my body said. Your flights are only imagination. So I looked into books that I had ignored before and read about saints in every age who actually flew. In India, Persia, China, and Spain, even Los Angeles, the power of spirit has reached not just into the heart, but into every cell of the body. As if carried aloft by a great eagle, St. Teresa said, my ecstasy lifted me into the air. I began to believe in this amazing feat, and for the first time, I didn't feel left behind. I was the falcon, and the child, and the saint. In my eyes, their lives became sainted, and the truth came home. When all life is seen as divine, everyone grows wings. There are so many ways that we can take and interpret this essay. There's the physical aspect, the human level, where we can think about how difficult it is to walk through life alongside of others and find that you are evolving or moving through life stages at a different pace or in a different way than your peers, hitting certain life milestones at different times, living in a more alternative way than others, feeling like you don't fit in some capacity because of your either physical limits or just the circumstances of your life aligning differently. I think you could absolutely read this piece and take it that way and take that meaning from it. But of course, I think there is something deeper going on as well in terms of the spiritual level that is consistent now in the first 4 pieces that we've read. Once again, we have this idea from Michael toward the very end where he talks about being all things at once. I was the falcon and the child and the saint. You know, he tells this story with multiple characters, and these are all different kinds of sources of inspiration to him. But ultimately, at the end, he's concluding that he is all of those things. He is the inspiration, he is the inspired. Obviously, there's this metaphor here of the falcon and flying, but I can't help but wonder if this is also based in the reality of Michael, something he actually experienced. Maybe he did look up at the sky and see a falcon flying and feel a sense of abandonment when he thought about the physical limitations of his life. One of my favorite songs of Michael's is Fly Away, which was on the 25th anniversary edition of Bad. Fly Away is a stunningly beautiful song. I can say so much about how I feel about that song and the beauty of his voice and the lyrics and the instrumentation, everything about it. But it resonates here to me that I think Michael was a person that identified with the kind of miracle of flight in some way. I mean, he obviously loved Peter Pan and that whole concept. But beyond that, I mean, he obviously admired nature and birds and the things that could happen physically in life. But I also think he saw metaphor and meaning in everything. I mean, that's the way this reads to me, at least, is that he had this moment of looking at the sky, noticing a bird, seeing it fly, and feeling a sense of human limitation that kind of confounded him. And so looking at it physically as a limitation, but then expanding it metaphorically into this kind of spiritual realm, I think says a lot about how Michael seemed to, based on, everything we've read so far and what many of us know about him, how he seemed to approach life. Everything was part of a larger system. Everything was connected. And perhaps we are meant to find meaning and beauty in everything. I feel that when I go into nature, I often find I can't help but think in metaphor. I can't help but find a sense of calm, a sense of understanding about life when I reflect on the ebb and flow of nature rather than the kind of manufactured existence so many of us live in as human beings. I think my favorite aspect of this poem, though, is that it feels so very real to who he was. I imagine him actually looking at the sky and actually contemplating that bird. I imagine him visiting a child in a hospital bed and caring for and showing love to that child. I imagine him studying these books, these figures in history, these saints, and trying to glean some meaning from what he was feeling. Again, that existential question we all have about what is life? What are we doing? How are we here? Why are we here? What terms and understandings can we come to make life feel worth living and manageable and beautiful? And where can we find meaning? Where can we find explanations for the things we don't know? How do we live with the uncertainty? And I think he shows the perfect example of how we are meant to live just in this poem. I mean, we are meant to look at the sky and contemplate. We are meant to serve and love others. We are meant to study and consider. We're meant for these things. And I think about him and I wonder often how he survived such a difficult life, in the public eye especially, so much scrutiny, so much pain from that. And I think a person would have to be exceptionally strong and centered in who they are and what is real and what isn't. We talk a lot about Michael living in a fantasy world, or the world talks a lot about him in this way. And again, I don't think it's fair to him, because from my perspective, he seemed to have a lot more figured out than many of us did, even within the limitations of his own life. I don't think his mind was limited, and maybe that's the difference. There were circumstances that limited him, but his mind was so expansive. I appreciate reading these kinds of reflections by Michael, and I have so much more I can say about them. But I hope, if nothing else, that hearing this piece, contemplating it with me, it could lead to all of us thinking about life more this way. When all life is seen as divine, everyone grows wings. Kind of like the sanctity of life, which doesn't end, I think, with the human, but with the world around us, with the micro and macro levels of existence. We all know, as fans, how he saved a little bug on the stage. So, I mean, this is kind of an example of that. This is the consistency of Michael's character that I think people refer to who knew him. There was a consistency there. I've heard so many stories about him caring deeply for all animals, great and small, and a real concern and interest in all of life. And I mean, what more could we ask for from someone that we wish to study and learn more about? We want someone complex. We want someone who can teach us things and give us perspective. That's what I want, at least. I don't want anything other than that, honestly, which is why I'm so endlessly fascinated by Michael Jackson, who is an enigma, a contradiction, but mostly, in my eyes, wise human being with a lot to offer and a lot to learn from. So I want to thank you for spending some time with me again today and enjoying this piece with me. I look forward to our next conversation. Until then, thank you for listening, and we'll talk soon.